Welcome to the 5 Foot On Podcast. I am your host, Shane Hazen. Coming up this week, we are discussing the Beatles' rival documentaries from the same footage, Let It Be from director Michael Lindsay-Hogg, and Peter Jackson's Get Back, recently released on Disney Plus in 3 mammoth parts. And I'm once again joined by Ted Haycraft.
Yeah, I'm surprised there wasn't any hobbits showing up in the trilogy.
Or, well, vice versa. Beatles may have shown up in some Lord of the Rings at some point. Yeah, apparently Jackson was like trying to get stories from them about how it exactly happened. But first off, Ted, what'd you watch this week? Anything interesting?
Well, yeah, you wanted me to talk about.
You just saw a cool screen.
Or
I wanted to hear your reaction to it.
DCP of Do the Right Thing. That opening credit sequence with Rosie dancing is kind of like, it's kind of in your face.
I've said this before. I saw it at the Paramount maybe like 2015, and I forgot Spike Lee. Whatever deficiencies you have from him, whatever problems, sometimes it's inconsistencies you have as a filmmaker. The one thing he is amazing at is his title sequences, and that is, for my money, the greatest title sequence in film history.
Really?
Okay. I went through a thing.
Statement.
I was trying to figure what is like the alternates. It's like Star Wars title sequence. Like, is that a title sequence? What is the bold title sequence that doesn't count, or that?
I mean, well, yeah, I get it.
Psycho.
It's North by Northwest.
North by Northwest.
And
then the criteria needs to be sharpened. Are we talking about design title sequences, isolated ones? Like Panic Room's got a really cool one.
Blowout.
Blowout, really?
The
audio
gauge.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no. This is the whole podcast. You're going down a rabbit hole here.
It is.
Of course, the guy getting choked at the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm. How the room react. You saw it at a university.
It was interesting. Hardly anybody. Only 2 or 3 of the students knew who Spike Lee was, and then hardly any of them saw the movie. I didn't see the movie.
Had seen the movie
had not. So
wait, they had seen the movie?
Had not.
Okay.
1989. It's pretty old now.
No, I get that.
But what's amazing is 1989.
But how did the students react?
I didn't really hear a reaction. They're all spread apart. Not that big a class. I mean, the attendance is not that huge, so I didn't hear any. I heard a guy behind me kind of getting, having the humorous parts he was getting into, but I got pretty quiet. I guess I could say it was very quiet at the end, especially when you're watching that. And I'm just like, we just saw this happen, in Minneapolis,
right?
Not that long ago. It's just like, holy crap!
It was, especially when all the stuff was happening last summer.
Yeah,
it was so. This movie is timeless and prescient. I went to the Bell Court this weekend in Nashville and saw The Power of the Dog, Jane Campion, which I've had trouble with Jane Campion in the past, and it's a 5-part structure, and there's something that happens at the 4th part that like made everything clear. So it's one of the better Jane Campions I've seen. But the movie I love is Come On, Come On. I always started realizing Mike Mills is probably one of my favorite working filmmakers.
Name some of his other films.
Beginners, 20th Century Women, Thumbsucker is that one of his? But the one movie of his a few years ago that blows my mind, and I'm surprised no one talks about it. To be fair, it's not a feature, it's a short. But when the National put out their album I Am Easy to Find, he did a 40-minute short with it in conjunction with the album with the National that is one of the best pieces of filmmaking I've seen this last decade. I have seen that every time. I am reduced to tears every single time, and I've seen that thing like 10 times by this time. Every single time I'm puddle. And Aaron and Bryce Dresser from the National did the music for Come On, Come On too. On top of being Joaquin Phoenix, gorgeous black and white photography of cities, great child performance in it. It's one of my favorites of the year. Cool. Speaking of other favorites of the year, are we ready to talk the Beatles?
Well, first of all, I didn't know. Did you guys?
Well, I should also mention we are joined by Aaron Smith,
Oh yeah,
our resident Beatlesologist.
You kind of like, yeah, he's sitting right here. We need to.
Well, you didn't have a movie you wanted to talk about this week, positively.
I did. I will talk about Do the Right Thing.
Okay.
Let me ask you this, Ted.
Yes.
Did Mookie do the right thing?
Oh.
Well, I tell you what, that's interesting you brought that up because I remember, I may be damned. Speaking too honestly, or whatever.
Do you want to say this in a recorded format, Ted?
You can pass.
No, but I'm just no. But I remember I was really kind of baffled and mixed about the trash can throw.
My first viewing, I totally was.
And
totally.
Now that I watched it again with all these years passed, I think it plays better for me now.
I had the exact same reaction. I mean, my first time I remember being kind of annoyed by it's like, well, he vandalized the store that he worked at.
Right.
And then he fought the guy after, or him and the Aiello's last scene was so contentious.
Yes.
But the years that have passed, it seems a little more two-sided.
Yeah, I think I had a better, because when you see a film with this much going on in it, and you're taking in, you want to get the narrative in, you want to get the, you're taking in so much, and that you don't get to digest your thoughts as well the first showing on a film this complicated in its own way. So by seeing it again, you can relax with the narrative, relax with the characters, and you can think about the themes and what's going on in subtexts. And I think I could pick up some things that I don't think I really picked up on the first time around because I was just so busy taking it in for the first time. Mm-hmm. So I think it's one of those films that is a required second, third viewing, type film.
I had different reactions every time with Radio Raheem, where I think the first time I saw him, I was like, "Don't resist the police," and then now it's just like, yeah.
I just thought Radio Raheem was occasionally obnoxious, and so But when that happens. And, when I saw it the first time, I kind of had that same situation. And then I saw Spike Lee in so many interviews say, only white people ask that question.
Yeah.
I had to think about, why was I asking myself that question?
Well, I saw it before last summer where I changed my mind. It was after Eric Garner and I Can't Breathe. Ooh. That was where this is literally an I Can't Breathe situation.
Do you think that's why they decided to bring this in for that screening?
Well, Eric, it was for a classroom, and I think probably I'm sure it was on Eric's mind when he booked it. But he was he goes, "This isn't Speed Racer." He opened up the semester with Speed Racer, and he was he did a really interesting, insightful intro for these kids that most of the kids had not seen the film. Most of the kids had not seen the film, and the majority of the kids didn't even know who Spike Lee was or he is. So it was interesting, but I'm sure that was on Eric's mind. But I think also just he always ends the semester with thought-provoking films to make the kids pick up subtexts and think about and not just be a glossy entertainment.
Let's go. Let's move on to the Beatles.
Fair enough.
I want to read this introduction. Ted.
Well, first of all, we're going to talk about Let It Be. Mm-hmm. So did you guys? Who revisited Let It Be? I did. I did not. Did you watch it again?
Oh, I'm glad we're doing a podcast on this.
I mean, I know
this is interesting because I think we can get down through a lot of different, side avenues here, and
so
our relationship with the Beatles probably
is different,
changes and
definitely
flavors our opinion of both films. And I know how Ted feels because obviously he's older and he grew up with them. He bought the albums as they came out. Mm-hmm. And I know my relationship with the band. I'm curious what your relationship with the band is. Are they important to you before this?
Get back me.
Why are you a Beatle fan? How did you become a Beatle fan?
Well, the funny thing is, no one in my family is a Beatles fan to this day. None. Like I try to get my brother's side of the family.
What are they fans of? Or are they just casual music listeners?
No, they're more than casual, but I mean, like when we were kids, Journey and Foreigner were in the tape deck. And my mom liked the Beatles, but she liked the Beatles before Revolver. So I had friends in high school who were kind of getting me into it, and I was album by album and patchy, but I really started when I first started getting into headphone rock in my teen years, then I started really going into Sgt. Pepper and the White Album's my favorite. But when I started read about Let It Be and Abbey Road before I listened to the albums, and reading the story behind all this made. We'll get to this in a second. I want to start out with this. Ted, in 2013 for Christmas, you bought me the copy of Mark Lewison's All In.
Yes,
or Tune In all these years. Which is his first volume of his epic 3-volume thing, which I looked it up, by the way. He said maybe next year volume 2 might come out, but it seems like it says it takes 10 years to write these things. We're talking, this book is 900 pages, small font.
There's even a longer version of that book out there that you could buy.
Really?
Yes.
What else is in it?
He edited it down. He says you can read that, you can enjoy this book without that, but I went ahead and pulled the trigger and got one, but I haven't started back into it again.
This is like I would compare it to Robert Caro's books on Lyndon Johnson, where it was just like he needed an indulgence to have this link, but I'm like 140 pages in and John and Paul are just meeting for the first time.
Well, I think it's the first book where we talk about the grandparents, the four.
It is fascinating going back to the lineage, going back pretty far. But I wanted to read his introduction.
Yeah, the intro is the most fantastic.
Well, no. I mean, I'm doing the very, very, very intro. This it's a great distillation of the Beatles about how he talks about the Beatles and just says in italics how, and the questions are how the Beatles repeatedly married cutting-edge originality with immense mainstream popularity when for almost anyone else these are mutually exclusive, and how and why they ditched their winning ideas every time the world raced to copy them. How they did everything with down-to-earth humor, honesty, optimism, style, charisma, irreverence, intelligence, and a particularly spiky disdain for falseness. How they were articulate, bold, curious, instinctive, challenging, blunt, sharp, polite, rude, perkers of pomposity, rule breakers never cowed by convention. How they created and sustained connection to their public, and how they resisted branding, commercial sponsorship, and corporate affiliation and hype. The Beatles were free of artifice and weren't the product of market research or focus groups or TV talent shows. They were original and developed organically when everyone else was looking the other way.
Well, that's, like I said, I love that book.
I'm looking forward to finally finishing the last 800 pages of it.
I was going to thought you were going to read the first part where and I think it opens up with Paul and John sitting head to head.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like, oh my gosh, that's ground zero for our era, for our pop culture. These two guys facing each other writing songs.
When I opened it up, I found this really nice card from 2013 Christmas. You know, you have a tendency to caricature yourself in some of these cards that you give to people, and you drew yourself with a Beatles mop. But you said exactly that in the card. You're like, this introduction is the genesis of a lot of our pop culture.
Right. So yeah, and I'm also thinking now. So your age, did you like just organically take to the Beatles, or did you, because of the stuff you were listening to, and you're like me and Aaron, all of us, we're collectors, we're interested in the history, we're interested in legacies, we like to go back and find the roots of who was inspirational to them. So was the Beatles more of I'm finding out about them historically for you, and then you did like the music, or were you my question is like the burden of trying to be a serious Beatle fan as the years go on is pretty a big burden, because I mean, I know a friend of ours, I won't name his name, but he's more a Stones guy, and I keep on going, you're going to come to the Beatles, you're going to come to him. He goes, no, but he's resisted because it's Beatles everywhere, you know. So did you take to it naturally, or it was more of a researching, finding out about them?
It was gradual, but it was naturally too.
Okay.
You know, one movie I'm going to bring up that I hadn't thought about in years until I was looking up Michael Lindsay-Hogg's filmography. Do you guys remember a movie that played on VH1 called Two of Us that had Aidan Quinn and Jared Harris? I remember really liking it, and I remember everyone else I know hating it and making fun of me for liking it, but that was one. And this is going to come up in this episode, but in college I read this book that I'm showing to you guys. It's this classic rock albums series, but it's on Abbey Road, Let It Be, and it's by author Peter Doggett. And I remember I read it right before I finally saw Let It Be for the first time, and I was like, wow, they recorded all of this stuff? And then when I finally saw the movie, I realized little to none of it is in the actual Let It Be movie.
Well, I mean, I like I said, I failed the prep work here.
Well, let me ask you, put this question to you both. Your first reactions to Get Back, the Peter Jackson one.
I'm astounded. I mean, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, and I'm shocked. I wrote down some reactions to some close friends of mine or people I respect, and they were having some problems with it. I just can't. You can't please some Beatle fans, I guess, but it's just. I don't know what everybody was expecting. I actually was. I guess I was so pleased that it wasn't the whitewash that originally was the buzz was going on. That was going to be a whitewash, and after watching this, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy that Ringo and Paul and the rest of them
The Widows
signed off on this. And
I think I was very worried about the whitewash, and I think I was a little too preemptively judgy of it, even while I was watching to appreciate. But I've rewatched a bunch of sequences I've had them on in the background. But Smith, what was your first reaction?
Oh, that was incredible.
Yeah.
But I think the problem that most people are having problems with are the length, obviously,
Yeah.
and
minutia of the work,
But
that's a part of it.
That's interesting that you would say that, because there's 150 hours of audio, 55 hours of video, and he still cuts that down to 7.5, 8 hours. So it isn't as if he didn't leave a lot on the cutting room floor. But the truth is, the minutia is what he left out, because there's so many outtakes. And on the original Let It Be, there used to be a circulating laser disc. That was the only way you could watch it.
I watched a DVD rip of that, I believe.
Well, honestly, we get to that, but there is on the Internet Archive 35 millimeter restoration. Looks great. So if you haven't watched it yet and you want to watch it again, because I know you have the laser disc, don't you?
No, but I had. I don't know if I should be saying this out loud, but I brought it. I booked it. I was at U of E, the film series, the Union Board. And I brought How I Won the War and Let It Be in for a double feature. And you can still rent it from Swank or Films Incorporated for 16 millimeter. Show Let It Be. Well, I just happened to go out someplace and made a nice little dub off of a film chain straight to VHS. So I had my own perfect, immaculate 16 millimeter copy on a VHS for years. It's still somewhere there. But so I've always had that. But I saw I should mention just for the state the facts. I saw the film at the Victory Theater on its.
What year was that, Ted?
1970. I'm old, but it was one of those. I think it was a birthday party or grab all the kids in the station wagon, take them down to the Victory, drop them off. I want to say it was a double feature. And I can believe what the other feature was. Support Your Local Sheriff with James Garner. I'm serious. Because they were UA films, and I remember that back then they had these really weird double features back then. So the parents dropped us off, and they didn't have to deal with us for 4 hours, and Let It Be and Support Your Local Sheriff.
Well, Ted, you and I have had this conversation a few episodes back, where my definition of what looks good versus yours, you're like I'm
very easygoing, yeah.
And I'm a big transfer issue. Part of the issue I had was with a lot of the way to work on the footage, but at the same time, that objection went away when I finally rewatched my copy of Let It Be. So your Internet 35 millimeter archive, which would have been a 16 millimeter blow up, how good is good looking, Smith?
Much better, honestly, because I had only seen the Laserdisc rip. That's the one that had been circulating forever, even in collector circles. So I had seen the Laserdisc rip a couple different times. Very dark. Definitely the Internet Archive version has been color corrected. Looks so much better. And
do you see grain in it?
No, it's not.
Okay.
I mean, it's the beauty of the Peter Jackson film is that it looks immaculate.
It does.
And I don't know what your reaction was when they first cut to the rooftop, but I was startled how good it looked, because I'd seen that in so many.
The studio stuff was the stuff that made me feel like. I mean, so much of what I saw in Let It Be and what was shot. I mean, they shot, like you said, 53 hours. With a lot of cameras, a lot of those cameras are just soft and out of focus.
Oh, sure.
And so you digitally, it's really difficult to make something in focus that it's near impossible. So the attempt to do it on this is what stood out. So it looked like, I think a lot of people are familiar with color timing and digital color timing through their Instagram. This looks like Instagram filters on some of the stuff. a lot of it was degraining. Or Ted, you've seen a lot of restorations where they get rid of grain and they smooth over that, and the circles of confusions and the dots go out. That's what I was seeing. And then you'd see it in outlines. But all that being said, again, when I rewatched Let It Be, I was like, well, they didn't really have a lot to work with. And even a lot of times when I was watching Get Back, it usually would take me like 10, 15 minutes to get into it. And my objections would go. But when they got into the studio and then when they went to the roof, I think a lot of that footage looked a lot better to my eyes. Some of it was the foreground people against those like studio colors.
And it was off and on too. There were certain scenes that I think lit correctly looked fine, and then literally would cut to the next scene and it would look very grainy and look very poor. And I mean, obviously, well, they're using 55 hours of footage, and they're not choosing simply because how it looks, but rather what they've captured. And so some of it is going to be off center, some of it's going to look poor, and that's the downside of that type of documentary filmmaking, is that you just have to take what you've got. But didn't you love every time they would say, like, this is the take that's on the album?
Yes, although the book I mentioned earlier that I read in college, one of the cool things it details a lot is what happens after this. So in Going to Abbey Road and then what Phil Spector did. And so when it would say the take, I'd be like, yes, this is the take. And it sounds close, but like there's so many different versions of all these the Let It Be Get Back songs. So iterations through the movie. And
so I mean, your point is you're saying it's not the take?
It's the take, but it's like I'm trying to listen to the song and all the like every little piece of audio candy coming to me, every little detail of it. I'm like, okay, but this is still off, or like, oh, they have the outro's back in this one, or it's not in that one, and maybe I doth protest too much.
Well, I know that's weird. I mean, I just treated this as I treated this as another artistic entity. I mean, I love Aaron. I'm glad you brought that up, because I loved every episode. They renamed, they retitled everybody. They gave you every song and who the writer was in the song. And,
that was cool.
And just these little touches, and it was really curious. It was really interesting. How much do you? And then some of the intrusions of other clips and stuff. Peter was very he wasn't too intrusive with that as much as he could have been, or the temptation was there, but he didn't. It's just the choices he had to make. I wouldn't want to be in his shoes.
Well, let's get this out of the way. What is your opinion on the original Let It Be film?
Well, that's what I was curious about, you guys. I just saw somebody on Facebook today, a friend of ours,
a
musical mentor and of mine, and he said it sucks. And I'd never thought it sucked. Well, of course, when I was 1970, I was a kid. That was just a godsend to see that as a kid in 1970.
Yeah.
I didn't see the negativity. I just saw Beatles singing and performing and working together. And I don't think I even keyed in that George was mad at the time.
Here's the thing. I have the exact same reaction. The thing about the Let It Be is it's hard to get, like, I think the first time I saw it, I don't even think I even clued into the, like, I'll play what you want me to play. Like,
I'll play nothing at all.
So I think it's a perfectly fine what Lindsay-Hogg had to do, what he was dealing with, what he was supposed to do, how he was supposed to handle it. I think it's a good piece of, I mean, it's not the end all be all of all musical documentaries, but it's certainly fine as it is.
I think what's always interesting about it is you recorded what is a pretty seminal moment in Beatles history and therefore pop history. And when you watch it, the songs carry you through more than the drama.
Right. So I'm thinking all these people that are complaining about this film where it can't get back. Well, they need to put Let It Be out then and just give it to them.
Well, and this gets to my point. Every little problem I had with Get Back went away when I rewatched Let It Be, because I was like, oh, this is what they were. Because I mean, Let It Be doesn't even have George leaving the band or mentioning it, because the original cut supposedly is like an hour longer, and that's one of the things Lindsay-Hogg had to cut out. The band was just like, oh, we don't need that.
Yeah. So, what did you think, Aaron?
Well, the obvious highlight of Let It Be is in Get Back, and it's one of the few things that he chose to use from the original film, and that's the rooftop concert.
Right.
So they're basically, Let It Be's an hour and 20 minutes. This is almost 8 hours. So you don't get much of the same, but I don't know, and maybe you do. I didn't read any reviews that went over what was in both films, other than obviously the stuff that's in the rooftop concert.
I kept a little bit of a tab of it. There was little things like I didn't Linda McCartney's daughter. Like that thing that's in the trailer of her hitting the drum and like waking Ringo up and giggling at that, little things like that. I'm like, oh wait, that's in both movies. We had a friend on Facebook, a great musician, Aaron Dissler, talk about like one of the reasons I love
Garden. That's beautiful. Yeah.
He's like Octopus. George helping out Ringo with Octopus Garden and trying to feel like, oh no, you want to change these chords so it resolves. That's in Let It Be. What I've always wanted for the other issue with Get Back versus Let It Be is that I always wanted a restored version of Let It Be. Like I want an audio cleared version. I want something with subtitles because half the time I've watched this movie 3 times and I still barely can tell. Like I listen I after reading a book, knowing what's coming in, I know like, oh yeah, well, John Lennon's like mad at Paul McCartney when he's telling him to get into the mic a little more. But
I tell you what, I had to, due to my circumstances of watching Get Back, I had to have closed captioning on. And so I watched all 3 parts.
Well, the audio in Get Back is so clean.
But I know, true. And if I had my own way, I don't have the subscription to. I had to go to my sister's place. If I had, I would have probably watched it without the captioning at the first run through. But I had the caption on because there was a lot of background noise going on.
I only watched it with the captions on. I thought that was a real nice addition.
Well,
I wouldn't necessarily watch everything with captions on, but I thought this worked very well.
Well, I know. I'm 63 years old. Most of my friends are starting to watch everything with captions on now. Everything, no matter what it is. I thought it was. I was going to say is that in regards to Let It Be closed captioning, you said about how you always wanted a copy of Let It Be with.
Well, I want the elements restored. I want them to go to I want to see grain on it.
But even with the captioning on for Get Back, and how clear the audio was, the 4 of them have their own Beatles speak. That at times it was like, what? How their phrasing and the words.
You pick up more every time. Like after reading those first few chapters of Tune In, I picked up skiffle and heard him say George say, "Oh, this has kind of got a skiffle vibe to it."
Right, you'd heard the word before. You had never heard before the book.
Not really.
Oh, really? Oh, you're talking to a Beatle. I was a.
The Quarrymen were a skiffle band.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, John's band was a skiffle band.
Do we want to get into this? Where like I feel like
we don't. I thought we were going to try and keep it more about the film. Because...
No, not the skiffle part. There's a vibe I've gotten. I wanted to hear you guys talk as Beatle experts, but there's a thing where I don't want. There in the past, I've had trouble talking Beatles with you because I don't feel like you guys make it clear my bona fides do not match up.
Well, it's a matter of age and plus a different interest and plus the fact.
But I do know a lot about the Beatles.
I know.
I am into the Beatles a lot. And yet it's more like...
But I was like a really freaky at one time.
But you're really into the Beatles.
But no, I've kind of slacked off over the last 20 years or so. It's a Lewis on book, of course, got me really excited to get one at that. Speaking of that book.
What news been there? Love and the remixes?
Well, there's always...
The remixes are amazing. I don't mean to be dismissing them.
There's constant Beatles stuff every year. I mean, it's never ending. Another friend of ours says, what more can they say? But then obviously when you see Get Back, you go, there's more to be said,
I also spent a lot of time with bootlegs. So there's alternate versions of every record, of every album, and in demos. And of course, that's what they've done with Escher demos, came out with the White Album. All that stuff was available. So, there was still stuff. And of course, there's a pretty famous... it's called A.B. Road, and I think it's 93 of the 150 hours that they recorded on the Niagara reels, and that's available. I spent some time with that. So, I mean, there was stuff available, even if you'd had all the albums and you'd listened to all the albums, seen all the films, there's still stuff available.
Dad, you were asking earlier about how one big way I got into the Beatles was Radiohead was the big band for me in high school, and the template of trying to be the biggest band in the world, both commercially and artistically. I always knew the Beatles was a model for them. So like Radiohead, I've listened to all the OK Mini 17 hours of the OK Mini disc thing, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Beatles, I've gone a little into, but not that far. I've listened to like alternate takes of a lot of different stuff. I've gone through obviously the anthologies multiple times, but
did you watch the anthology when it was out?
no, I watched it much later.
Oh, that's why. Well,
No.
That's why I'm surprised you didn't know what skiffle was. Because
it was on there, but I saw it later. I just don't remember the term, Ted.
Okay. I'm just, that's why and I know you get frustrated because I roll my eyes and I come off as Mr.
You get kicked off the podcast because you don't know what skiffle is.
No.
Well, I honestly though, that's the reason that I started off with what your relationship was with the band, because I feel like, if they had said, Peter Jackson got all 55 hours of video footage that they filmed for Let It Be, and he had just randomly put any 7 hours out, I was probably going to enjoy it.
I think both of you would be along
Yeah,
those
exactly.
lines. I think there's a
So-
lot of people. This is also a discrepancy where if you're listening to this and not as huge Beatle fan, like this seems like something people have been talking about. Where like one comment I got from a friend was like, "Oh, I just wish there was a shorter, more edited version of this." And I was like, "Oh, what would you think of an hour 20-minute version of this?"
Well, but honestly, that one, and obviously you didn't watch it recently, but I'm sure you've at this point probably seen it more than I have. Do you think it keeps you at arm's length? Whereas,
Oh yeah,
Get Back
and the thing that
drags you into it.
the frustrating thing to me was that all the whitewashing issues I was worried about Get Back, like chronology is out the window in Let It Be, and also like they moved to the studio with no the Apple Studio with like no mention, Savile Row, I guess it is.
No real explanation.
It's just there.
And Jackson kind of sets that up because the first day in, George is complaining about the acoustics.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
you get the
Oh,
impression
yeah.
that they're moving out of that.
Or
It's
hell,
just
even
temporary.
just an introduction to Billy Preston, like
Yeah,
and like
that was nice.
in understanding that like, oh yeah, that made things a lot easier, and it's for a while they had a fifth Beatle. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, I it's really baffling. I can understand casual Beatle fans or casual music documentary fans going, "This is way too much. This is too. I can't."
How many versions of Get Back can you hear?
Yeah, how the different what's baffling me is some of the people that I know bailing out on it, and I'm like, "What? Really? Okay. I mean, wow. I mean, like Aaron said, I could almost just give me the whole raw footage and I'll watch the whole all 160 hours or whatever,
Yeah. Well, I think Disney Plus first off, Disney being the one to put it out is one of those reasons to be scared of the whitewashing. But putting it out over Thanksgiving, over the 3 days, meant that it felt like it was supposed to be on the background for families and a holiday.
Yeah.
And it was at our house.
It's at my sister's house.
My rewatching of it has been on the background. It's fun to have it and just going in and out of details. Like, I mean, I have just to make sure there's certain sequences I've rewatched a few times, but
Were you picking and choosing or just putting on?
picking and choosing.
So-
like, I wanted to see how they cut together when George left, because apparently what it was one of my favorite sequences in the whole thing is the pot conversation with Lennon.
I got a little uneasy with that sequence.
That is years in the making. I'm surprised that's never leaked before. Because a lot of what they said is that there was a lot of Jackson's work was using a lot of digital technology has gotten good about like separating elements. Are you seeing this stuff online where you can separate vocals in songs or take vocals out of songs?
Well, that's what he said because he was on a documentary on the Fab 4 channel on Sirius XM. And he said that the one thing that they felt like, and obviously with video, he had done that with They Will Never Grow Old.
Yeah.
But that audio breakthrough was the thing that they thought that was important about what they had done with this, where they could break apart. If John was talking over Paul like you and I just were, he could take those two and make separate tracks of them.
The George breakup was in the tea kettle microphone, but the audio was too bad to do anything with it. And obviously they culled together the footage. There's like the one shot they have is a very bizarre slow motion frame extended shot when that sequence comes up. But that's one of the sequences I wanted to watch multiple times, or I wanted to watch just some of the reviews I did see seem to be universal. Everyone's like the last 40 minutes, the rooftop. is, and and rewatching Let It Be today is significantly better than Let It Be's version of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but even though that
It's full, it's
Rooftop
complete,
is
you still
the-
get a better sense of what's happening on the ground. The stuff, even
still-
the intercutting with the cops is fun.
But I almost still would want another version. Oh gosh, this is Beatle fans want more. I almost
you knew that was inevitable.
Well, just a rooftop sequence was just concentrating on the band, which is the Let It Be movie does pretty much. Whereas,
With limited songs though.
yeah, with limited songs. So I like to have a version where it just concentrates on the band. I love the split screen. I love the Bobby's talking. I love all that stuff and Mal walking up and down and everything going on. That was great, and the other reactions on the street was great. I love that.
The split screens in particular are
Yeah.
just the separate angles.
Yeah, but yeah, and it's so refreshing too. Another reason I'd like to have just a kind of a full screen concentrating on the band is today's editing on music videos and performances. The camera's just going to do gymnastics and flip around and quick edits, and you don't get to see.
They
do that real briefly after George leaves. They have a sequence that they cut that way.
They
really
said they
briefly.
had 10 cameras, 3 on the ground, 5 on the rooftop, 1 on the building across the way.
Yeah.
But each camera's only got 16 minutes of footage,
Right.
So you are going to have to cut. You're not going to have one shot.
No.
Shot
Yeah, a constant cover shot like you could do now. No, you're talking about now. Are you talking about there? That's one thing I want to talk about. The build up before George leaves.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're talking about, the editing there?
No, it's after he leaves. There's a when they have the freak out with they all come back like nothing's happened, and Yoko Ono starts doing the screaming and jamming with them.
Mm-hmm.
When she's in the screaming, there's like
the closed captioning says wailing.
In the book that I mentioned that I read in college, they were somehow like a lot of stuff in the doc, like he had access to. I don't know if he watched all the footage or what, but he recurrent to a lot of Beatles stuff. He was dismissive of Yoko Ono, but he was really angry at her for jamming with them, and then or yelling at John and
they seem to be having a good time. Paul on the drums is amazing. Yes. I really love those sequences.
George is a good drummer too.
Yeah. And John's not a terrible bassist.
Back in the USSR. Paul's a great drummer.
Yeah. Well, I think that was always the claim when John said, is Ringo the best drummer in the world, and he's not even the best drummer in the Beatles.
Right.
I think he was talking about Paul.
Well, it's always been a given. We talked about how across the board, Paul he's an expert in everything. He's just much better almost on every instrument.
And the thing with Paul or Ringo being best is, I went down a YouTube hole watching his drumming, and half of him being left-handed and forced to play right-handed, like his fills are like half his sweep on a hi-hat sounds distinct, but his fills, because he has to still inadvertently lead with his left, even he's supposed to lead with his right, like his fills are amazing sounding too, and distinct. They're so distinct.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's incredible, but obviously you see in those sequences, Paul is an incredible drummer, and that doesn't necessarily come across because he doesn't really get, and even in those solo albums, and of course we're getting away from the film here, but he plays all of his own instruments, and it's real shaggy. Like it doesn't sound as if, he's putting his full Beatle Paul into it, and maybe he isn't. Maybe he doesn't want to have that Beatle sheen to it.
The thing in watching them rehearse coming up, everyone seems to be amazed at watching Get Back come together, the main Get Back riff come together, it just comes out of his head.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, that is. And he wrote that on the bass, which
just standing there. I mean, and then I'm just like, and to take it, that is just,
You're so speechless right now.
I know it's like the heavens opened up and just came down on these guys.
You was reading the book and they were
talking that moment of inspiration.
Yeah, and I look
kind of like in Don't Look Back.
And I love how he's going with this protest angle, and then Peter, thank you Peter Jackson for contextualizing it for us with clips and stuff, news clips and stuff. So, but I love it. He takes the song this route. And then he pulls it back to more of abstract and makes the volume even better by going abstract and taking out the protest detail stuff.
When they in this book I read in college, they were showing the copy that they put out whenever they finally put the single out, and they realized this is a good #1 single. And Paul kind of oversaw and maybe wrote some of the copy they did, but he even mentions it came out of my head fully formed. way from the beginning. I think Malcolm Gladwell came up with his 10,000 hours. One of his sources is Lennon and McCartney playing so many hours together. And yet they are constantly fixating on friends being fun and being loose and like they're always playing with each other when they're playing. Like when I mean playing, I mean like doing like a yes, gag. Yeah, you TV on the radio, but you're doing like a Lennon.
I loved when they were doing that, where they were singing through their teeth at each other.
Yeah, or they're just constantly doing impressions when they do a different version.
But they were clearly locked in on each other while they were recording, and I mean, they were
So
obviously still close.
As perfectionists as they can be, they're always playing, trying to make the songs as playful as possible.
Well, did you read that article, the Variety article, or I think it's a video too, of Peter Jackson talking about, we got the impression, we've had the impression over the last 30 or 40 years that Paul and Ringo have had bad memories of it. And it's like, you guys are thinking, you saw the movie in the midst of your breakup and everything was going to crap.
And in life in general.
But when you were doing this in '69, things were, they were wavering, but nothing. You still were a unit and still working together, and still, and of course George walked out, but Ringo walked out during the White Album session.
Yeah, which they bring up.
It's not a precedent for that.
Well, one of the cool things I was reading in this book was talking about what seems like got to be one of the biggest issues of the very practical distillation of the Beatles issues is. It's in Get Back. It's the sequence where the song publisher comes in and they're all friendly
Dick
with
James.
him. Yeah, Dick James, and like him, working or trying to usurp power.
It's
like just months after this, is when he tries to sell out, and then Lennon McCartney loses control over the ownership of their stuff, and that's got to be a riff. And they keep detailing like they always saw each other's in like boardrooms with businessmen for a few months after this.
Yeah, and John talking about Alvin Klein.
Those are little
seeing that in hindsight.
Yeah, in hindsight.
At the time, he was excited.
But no, isn't that a point Jackson put that in? Those are little details.
Glenn Johns was telling him he's a shady character, and
okay,
we all know what happens. But at the time, I was like, listen. He obviously, I don't know what relationship Glenn Johns had with him, but clearly he had kind of seen through the veneer.
You mentioned Linda. I thought it was here's just a little Beatle gooby things that excited me throughout the whole thing. You see her poking on a piano, and you instantly think of her being in Wings. The foreshadowing of Wings, and just little things like that would just. And I loved it. Were you cracking up the Jimmy Nichols jokes?
Yeah,
I just and they would use him for a punch as a good one-liner.
It was beautiful though. Paul a lot of times would just whoever showed up in the studio like what was Peter Sellers doing? That was such
Peter Sellers is in Let It Be. I was surprised he's actually in Let It Be.
Right, but that seems odd. Like he shows up.
Yeah, but I think he was.
Says hi to
well,
Ringo,
he's in Magic Christian
the whole time.
Well, Peter, I could, and plus he's competing with. He's an egomaniac, and the Beatles are big egos, and so there's kind of a. I don't think Peter wanted to show his cards
on camera
with the camera, and who would up each other.
What's also funny is, all right, the other big question I was going to lead to you guys is reading people's reactions. Like it feels like it relitigates everyone's feelings of the band in general, where everyone had to pick a favorite Beatle, and then like reading who was feeling what at any given time, who was the asshole, who was the instigator, who was the victim. All this stuff is debated all over again. And it just feels like that sequence with Peter Sellers in particular is the only time in the movie there's a joke about heroin. And John Lennon, to me, I just thought John Lennon was very stoned throughout the whole thing.
Well, I think we know that he was
very passive.
When we read it over the books and stuff. But I mean, yeah, and John's already taken the lead on comedy there with Peter there. So I don't know if Peter wants to compete with him. But you got to understand, of course, to Peter, that's one of their heroes because they grew up on the Goon Show, on the Radio Goon Show. And then, of course, the reason they got Richard Lester, because I had to bring up Richard Lester. Don't shake your head. Don't do that because this is legit.
TV on the radio, I'm shaking my head, and I'm still shaking my head. He had to bring up Richard Lester here.
Because the
Beatles.
Because they didn't want to do another Elvis Presley type film. They wanted to just, and Lester had directed the Goon Shows, Peter Sellers on the TV. So
you've never brought this up on the podcast before, Ted.
So anyway, there was that was the Peter, and they were going to shoot Magic Christian here in a few weeks.
Second Terry Southern movie that Ringo was in. Candy was one, right?
Yeah, he's in Candy too. Yeah, that's right.
I didn't get the impression Lennon was that stoned. I mean, he was late every day, but I
He was
didn't.
late. I think it's just that when you think of McCartney Lennon at this point of being because the whole the other paradigm here is that they're the songwriting duos, they're the ones, the older ones that have been like, and George Harrison is coming from the previous Thanksgiving he spent in Woodstock with the band and Bob Dylan, and he got treated as an equal. He comes back and it's just he feels like he's being discarded, and that's a big issue, and that's why he leaves, and that's why he's so angry, just because he's trying to figure out how to. And it was so many people point out this is fallout from the White Album sessions, but the movie, it feels like McCartney's. To me, it felt like McCartney was the one that was rejecting it, and then most books I've read say that Lennon was the one that was rejecting Harrison's songwriting contributions.
I think it comes in. These guys are brothers. They're close. They went through a huge hurricane for years together, and there's times where they're slogging on each other, but at other times they're just buddy. It's just like friends that you have ups and downs with. I think it comes down to that. I think
That's true, yes, but that doesn't excuse the fact that they don't use his best songs. I mean, they talk about how All Things Must Pass is in the in the list to make the album, and then they don't use it.
I'm not talking about. Yeah.
So I mean, they don't understand.
They don't mention.
They don't get him.
One thing that bugged me.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just disagreeing when you said something about
and
John would later say, "Oh, you didn't have that good a song." I mean, I think it was just like what particular day you're interviewing John, you're going to get a different answer sometimes, and not being consistent with the love. Because you look at the talk when they talk about George, there's obviously. There's a lot of.
Well, he's younger
well,
too.
The end of
25 years old.
They're 28 at the time. He's I think Paul's 27 or 28. Ringo's 27, 28. George's is 25, and so he's the little brother.
Young. One thing at the end of episode 1, they play "Isn't It a Pity?" And whenever he quit the band, he went home and wrote "Wah Wah" like that night.
Yeah,
like just,
he wrote. That was actually something. Have you ever heard of that science fiction show on British TV that George had watched? So we talked about watching this science fiction show, and then there was a dance hall, and that was in Walt's time, and that's why he wrote
"I'm Mine."
I'm Mine in Walt's time.
Well, I want to go back to when George quitting. I wanted to see if I was being. I thought I saw this, and I want to see if you guys thought so too. I think Peter did some editorializing there.
Oh yeah. Because they didn't. That's what I was saying earlier with the stuff in the recording and the teapot. They didn't get it on film. Mm-hmm. They had to call that together and fake that around.
Well, right before George walks out, and it almost happens without you going, "What?" It's just so subtle and so quick and so low key. It's not. There's no George. I guess there's not. George goes, "Hey guys, I'm going to quit." He just says,
I'll be leaving then.
Yeah.
I'll be leaving then.
The band.
Yeah. And go get some lunch or see you in the clubs.
See you around the clubs.
But Peter is editing a bunch of footage of John and Paul working really close together, editing it fast, and then he'll stick a shot of George watching them, and then go back to them really working, and George. And I'm thinking, he's helping us He's putting his take on what he.
We used to, one of the movies I worked on, we called it Kulishaving, where it's a phase technique where you can do anything with editing, where you put a man with a blank face and you put a baby next to the next shot, then you think the man's carrying. You put an apple next to him, they think they're hungry. So Kulishaving is like stealing a shot from somewhere else to make it.
Well, I don't know if he stole it. I don't think for that he stole it from far away. He sped it up and then focused on it. To give us maybe what George was going through, because when George quits, it's so subtle. If Peter hadn't edited it that way, we probably would have gone, huh? But I think he helps us to think what George going through George's mind. Now, is that fair for Peter to do that or not?
That's all over the dock. That's all over the dock. Maybe not as stylish as that Key of a Moment.
That's one that stuck out to me.
That stands out, but that's all over the dock. However,
No,
especially going back to Let It Be, I think I was thinking that Get Back changed the chronology on a lot of stuff, but going back, no, it's great on chronology. So I think that
it's interesting too, because I think near some of the last days in the studio, talking about editing, he cuts back to the day before. You can tell by the clothes they're wearing, or Heather being there. But I thought there was like a fog around those edits.
Oh yeah, no, there totally was. There totally was. Yeah, he's definitely making a flashback.
Guys, I know I'm going back the day before, and I'm going to let you know.
Well, because it's when they're listening to the session. They're listening to what they played. They're recording. They're listening to what they recorded the day before.
Okay. See, that's just why I'm going to have to watch it again, because there's just so much to take in, and so much, and Beatle, the old Beatle freak in me came out of me, and I'm just going crazy over this stuff. So
I had a similar experience too, where I felt like, because I had bought the re-released album and I still hadn't even opened it, and then of course after I started watching that, I was like, I really need to dig this out because I want to remember how this sounds. And obviously, like Shane pointed out, there's a lot of Phil Spector on there, so it doesn't sound like it does in the film, but it's just a completely great album that they basically just and some of those songs have been around since India from '68, before the White Album, but several of those things they just came up with just right there in the studio.
I listened to a lot of Abbey Road this week too, on top of going back to Let It Be. But one of the things, just rereading the chronology, like they meet in January. The White Album just came out the November before. Like,
it's still on the charts, I think, when they were meeting. I think. And
like George is saying, "Oh, we've been in a doldrum for a year." At some point there, it just blows my the cycle, the pace. Like that's the thing that like modern artists really can't. Like a modern band probably would have still stayed together just because they would have taken a year off.
I think George was on to something, and I've actually said this to Ted a couple of times when we had this similar conversation. But at the end, when he's talking to John about putting together his own album, about how that would take some of the pressure off the group and everyone could do their own album. And I think that's what really could have saved the band, is if John, because he had already made Two Virgins with Yoko, if George could do his solo album, he does a compressed All Things Must Pass, and then Paul does his own solo album. It's similar to what happens with the Stones when Mick makes his solo album. They realize that, they work better together as a group. They can't really reach the heights individually as they could as a group. And that takes a lot of the pressure off them. And of course, the cycle obviously now is 5 years for an album. You brought up the National. It's generally between 3 and 5 years between albums for most big bands now. Yeah. And they were putting out an album every 9 to 12 months.
Well, the other thing I listened to after this was on Spotify. I don't know if they follow the Richard Linklater playlist, but I listened to the Black Album that was in Boyhood, where I don't know if Linklater originated, or was this before Linklater, the Black Album?
I think so.
Where you take all these songs from the 70s of them as individual artists and make a double album out of it.
Yeah.
And you really come to the feeling that their powers together were just so amazing.
Yeah, and of course the one person in the group that's not getting their outlet is George, and his album is, I think most people say, I think it's Lennon's.
I think Plastic Ono Band are some of my favorites.
Plastic Ono Band for me.
All Things Must Pass.
But All Things Must Pass is incredible. Yeah. And Ted and I actually just talked about this recently, how I think it's a double album with a third record kind of thrown in that no one ever listens to. But he claims to listen to it consistently. Like
when I was a kid, I did. Because I had a turntable that would play the record, after it plays one side, the second record on there would drop down, and then it would play the second record. You stack your records on this needle. They would all play. And I did that with the Bangladesh concert. I listened to all the Ravi Shankar stuff.
But that's Oh, yeah, the Ravi Shankar stuff. The Ravi Shankar stuff's more listenable, I think, than that last disc of All Things Must Pass.
I do have to interject that, ironically and interesting, I guess only to myself maybe, but my two favorite Beatles songs are from this session of all time. I mean, I know and people go, really? But I got a feeling it's my favorite Beatles song. And
Really?
and my number 2 song is "Don't Let Me Down." And I
I
know
can almost understand "Don't Let Me Down" the more I got a feeling. That's what do you, can you?
well
What is it? Do you know? Can you say?
first of all, I just love the riff there. The Paul's riff on and I love John's sardonic. Everybody had to put the foot down. Everybody let their head.
It is really cool how the fragments
and
come
then you
together
take-
and you see this.
And then you get to see Paul and John. You see how Paul is musically, how John is musically, and you get to see them singing it together as a duo. Just to me, that just crystallizes them
One
so
cool
perfectly.
one cool thing in Get Back is you see this is 2 song fragments come together, and it's not even like the Abbey Road medley where like they strung together some half finished songs in a beautiful way. Those overlap over each other on
Right.
a feeling.
It's just wonder, and then people, if you think about "Don't Let Me Down," it's not. It's a very simplistic song in many ways, but yet it's just so powerful. And that's the magic of music, of course. And I just love that. And I've always been a big fan of Two of Us too. I always think about my at the time one of my best friends and I, how we would go off on hikes in the woods and do things together, and then I always thought that was a really nice song. And then I think of John and Paul doing things together.
Smith, do you have a favorite?
Well, it wouldn't be any of those songs, sure, but
I always want to bring it up because I as much as Let It Be, it's kind of it's not as everybody talks about White Album, Sgt. Pepper, and Revolver and stuff like that. But I funny enough, those 2 songs have stayed at the top with me.
I did like how Two of Us, similar to Get Back, it transitions from a different song. When they're originally playing it, it's a standard 4x4, and then later they realize we need to do this acoustically, and that's the take that they use. And the evolution of Two of Us, I think, made it a complete. But I'd actually love to hear that finished version if they have a full take of that first version that they're using. Same as the full band version of All Things Must Pass that they do in the first sequence. I was like, this is beautiful. I mean, I really think that if they'd finish that, if there's a finished take, somehow that would be kind of a holy grail for Beatles collectors.
Smith, I think you're also getting out of naming your favorite Beatles song.
Oh, no, I'm a Lennon guy, so you probably Rain, something like that.
Okay.
Strawberry Fields.
Rain was paper. The reason they had a connection with Lindsay-Hogg was he did the promotional films for Paperback Writer, Rain, Hey Jude, and Revolution. But Hey Jude was TV work made the most sense there. But
So Shane, was he or was he not the son of Orson Welles?
you brought that up. I didn't have to bring that up. That's so much. So supposedly there's a thing with the lineage that he might. His mother hinted that he might be the son of Orson Welles, and he mentions Orson Welles and Get Back.
Yeah, and Orson goes up.
Elvis
Again,
Peter Jackson bringing.
little
Peter Jackson
goofy.
knows what he's doing by
Yeah,
bringing
Peter.
that up.
I mean, he's all and then and then I was surprised. It was nice to see Patty showed up briefly. Of course, I knew Maureen. You see Maureen in the Let It Be movie. But yeah, and did you notice? I've always defended Yoko. I know I grew up and everybody just like about it, and I was like, no, look, John could. Here was my take at a very young age. I'm such an old, mature guy back then. I'm much younger than that now. I always thought if John could have any woman in the world, he could be, he could have done, whatever he wanted to do, and he chose Yoko and he stayed with her. So I
have had a very similar thing where you're just like, you learn to love Yoko because John Lennon loves Yoko.
Yeah. But that said, after watching this, multi-part thing and seeing her, attached at the, the side to him, and you see Linda comes in, she sits to the side. Marines, they all
Oh,
nice.
so she knows
Isn't
her
that
place.
John
Is that
Lennon?
what you're saying, Ted?
Oh gosh.
Sorry. No,
yeah.
that was unfair.
Yeah,
Well, George Harrison's Hare Krishnas are also sitting.
they're sitting off to the side. It's like they're working, Aaron. Would you? Can your wife?
No, I get what you're saying.
Can your wife?
No, I
Next
understand.
to you the whole time at show
Isn't
place?
that? Didn't
Here's
John
the
Lennon?
problem.
John Lennon asked for that to happen. He's been
No,
having that since the White Album.
So you said my favorite not John Lennon. My favorite Beatles song is "Don't Let Me Down." The reason,
Second one.
okay, the reason reason that's so good, it's written for Yoko.
Oh no,
I'm in love for the first time.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
about Yoko. So I mean, that's what he's feeling right then. That's important to him.
I know. I totally get it. I totally
McCartney
get
to
it.
say, are people going to say
Be
that
upset.
the Beatles broke up because Yoko sat on an amp?
Yeah.
But they do.
People
do say that.
People really get upset about it, and it tested me this time watching it. It tested my I tested my defense of Yoko. I just I just thought Yoko's a very
one really key thing that I think historically that I think is not contextually brought up a lot that I was reading. Yoko Ono was like 3 months out from a miscarriage too.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It doesn't answer your point about why she on stage where everyone else is
it's such a touchy subject with any Beatle fan you talk to. I just thought it was interesting to see 8 hours of it. I guess
Yoko Ono is kind of a fascinating figure just because a friend was telling me about this. She's a convergence of all these like misogynist tropes, anti-Asian tropes, all the like things of like. Was she a conniving artist at the time? She was married during the middle of this, trying to get out of her marriage. Like all these convergence of reasons for people to like when she didn't deserve them.
No, I never all those tropes you just mentioned. They really never factored into my thinking.
Well, it's always the subtle way. Like it's
true. But when I did see it, I just thought it was interesting that like you said, the Hare Krishnas were sitting to the side. Linda comes and sits to the side. Everybody's sitting to the side. And I'm just, you would think that at some point with John and Yoko being who they are and how smart they are, that they would go, well, maybe maybe this is a little bit too much or something. But
I think John in particular seems like he's using Yoko Ono to be his
a
barrier.
wedge.
Yeah, because I mean, when they go to George's house at the end of part 1, who does all the speaking for John? It's Yoko Ono.
Yeah,
and it's probably at John Lennon's best.
I did notice that the thank yous, usually the widows are the
they were executive producers.
I thought it was Sean was now he's now in charge because of Yoko maybe getting to the point of not being as involved anymore. I saw.
Well, she was an executive producer on it.
I saw a listing where it was like they were consulting Sean and not Yoko.
She was. I think it was the last episode because I was watching that one because that's when they went back to the studio and like chronologically got the last take of Two of Us and the Let It Be take. But when they had the credits over that, then the title card comes up and it's
Olivia and
it's Paul and Ringo, and then the next title card are the Widows.
I don't think that the other Beatles seem to be nearly as bothered by it as Beatles fans are because Paul seemed to be having a great time. Obviously, when the three of them played together, they jammed together at 2 different. And of course, maybe
they seem like they're having fun during the jam.
That's Jackson editorializing. I don't know, but it seemed like
the expression
Paul's
on your
having
face,
a great
you can't
time.
Fake that editorial.
Yeah, no. Well, it's
really hard
and
to.
You never hear George having any complaint. You never hear Ringo having any complaint.
Aaron, you remember that there was one point where I thought it was really nice. Yoko actually, when George talked about his solo album, Yoko goes, you hear Yoko going, "That would be great. That would be great."
Yeah.
Really encouraging, So
yeah, I don't think their impression of it is similar to Beatles fans. And when you say Beatles fans, that includes us. But I mean, I don't think that I was ever that way. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just funny how. But anyway,
I mean, you can blame. Well, like I said, I can blame a lot of things, but obviously Shane hit upon it. I think you're just asking too much of any 4 people to be that close and to put out this much product in a 10-year span. It's just going to burn anybody out. And it's impossible.
Well, it's funny. Yoko Ono has become the archetype of someone that is maybe unfairly blamed for ruining a good thing that was probably going to go bad, and it inevitably had to go bad after a certain point.
I guess the fact that I always tend to be a romantic, believe in soul partners and true love. That I always thought, well, if John says this is the woman, this is the woman. Enough said.
Absolutely.
So.
I think that's true.
One last point I want to make, and we can keep going off that. But one big last point I want to make is all the whitewashing I was worried about. I do think there was a lot of Peter Jackson. Probably it felt like he did get some level of revisionism from Paul and maybe Ringo, but it's more. I mean, This Get Back was released. Yesterday was the 20-year anniversary of George Harrison's death. So it's more of an old man remembering his best friends from his youth, or these men remembering their best friends from their youth, and it's more fondly and fun. So if there's revisionism, it's more trying to bring out the fun they had together.
Yeah, and also that Peter Jackson article in Variety where he said something about the fact that you get to see them, how they work through it and how they working with things going wrong. If everything had been too copacetic and they were just doodle-doo making an album, what would the story be? What would the dramatics be? The fact that we have that here, we see this band of brothers, these genius level, the four of them together, to see them, doing this daily grunge every day, going in and working at it, and to see the magic come out of it. It's just amazing that they capture that. And where else do we have that captured? Hardly. It's very rare. I think we're very lucky, I think.
Where does this rank on your, for both of you, where's this rank on rock documentaries now? Get Back.
Ooh.
Or where does Let It Be rank on them? It's probably not that high.
No, I think I loved Let It Be. I don't.
Yeah, it's interesting to see some of the reactions now coming out of the woodwork for me on Let It Be. I never thought it had, amongst Beatle fans, I never thought we had it. We just wanted a copy of it. We just wanted a good copy of it.
Well, that is an issue.
Yeah.
But no, so with that, where's Get Back now?
I don't think it's. I think I prefer Scorsese's No Direction Home, and probably even Rolling Thunder as well. I mean, it could be top 10, maybe. I think it'd be easily top 10.
It's almost its own weird thing. I mean, it's just so huge and monumental in its own weird way, and it's and the structure, the uniqueness of it, and the fact that Peter was able to get it. I love the calendar,
absolutely, yeah,
spelling that out for us and keeping us on track. I suppose, like as opposed to Let It Be, where you're kind of like, where are we now? Or
you really don't know where you're at. Let It Be.
And so that was, so I think he just, I mean, I was kind of getting a little. No, I take that back, because the World War I movie was just fantastic too. So I think Peter, kudos to him that he was able to wrangle this thing down and do what he did. It's so monumental. But yeah, I think in terms of the No Direction Home, and it only goes from his childhood to 66. That's the amazing thing, that I could watch that thing all the time. But it's much more digestible. I think with the Let It Be, like you said, you're either going to have it in the background or you're going to be sitting there and studying it, because there's so much to.
You mean with Get Back?
Yeah, with Get Back, there's so much to take, to really examine. Whereas I just get so much joy seeing the world react to Bob's ascending into the pop culture world. And then Rolling Thunder, we should do a podcast on that, because of how divisive that is.
You two can do a podcast on that.
Well, where do you stand on it as far as just like music documentaries?
I really like what Ted said. I think it is its own beast, because it is.
So you wouldn't.
It's unwieldy.
Try and categorize it with.
What's your favorite music documentary? Because you're obviously.
If you guys
talk about the Dylan stuff, like me and
if you guys want to go visit back to my episode with Grant G, it's Meeting People is Easy with Radiohead. Oh, I think that's just such a stylistically inventive, one of the most beautifully edited.
That's showing your age, your era too, somewhat.
It's
great,
though.
That's showing you've never seen that doc, and you don't.
You think so? You think,
yeah.
It'll blow out everything else.
I'm surprised, Ted, that you haven't gotten into Radiohead.
No, I have not.
And you're so backhanded about it. So.
Because at this point, they're classic rock.
Yeah.
Honestly.
They are dad rock now. They are dad rock. No. So you're showing we're all showing our age.
So
my favorite band is also an old band.
It used to not be an old band. What's the quote? I used to be with it,
but they changed what it was. And now what it is weird and scary.
So what are the kids
and it'll happen to you.
What are the kids listening to these days, guys?
Waiting for the Billie Eilish's 40th anniversary of the doc.
Yeah, I got that new Billie Eilish record. It's really good. I mean,
I like Billie Eilish.
She's pretty great.
I watched her doc on Disney Plus.
I like Maggie Rogers. Do you guys know Maggie Rogers?
This seems as good a time as any to cut this off. So.
But I will mention.
Oh no!
In another weird, just fun synchronicity things and things happen in life. So I go in the third night of watching the documentary My Sister's Place. She has on HBO the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame deduction, and both Paul is on there introducing the Foo Fighters and saying how they kind of had a little parallel evolution. And then Ringo's on there, and guess who he's inducting?
Billy Preston.
Billy Preston.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
So it's kind of nice. Like, oh, it's I like to have one of those little weird things happen in life when those things have kind of sync up.
All right.
I'm glitching the Matrix.
I'm seriously calling this. Thanks everybody for listening. Smith, thanks for being on.
Shane, I just hope we pass the audition.
You always have the best last lines, Ted. Yeah, you just you just plan these out and just like sneak them in as
he has that written on a legal pad over there, I'm sure.
Thanks everybody for listening.